political accountability, and the growing issue of public trust. As Stephen A. Smith stands by his position, Chris Cuomo pushes back with facts and arguments that put his claims under serious pressure. So, let's get into the heated exchange and see how Chris Cuomo challenges Stephen A. Smith on News Nation's Cuomo.
We saw that on display. And you say that you see plenty of room for coming at Mr. Fauci and the Democrats when it comes to COVID, because...
Well, I see plenty of room coming after the Democrats. My only issue with Dr. Fauci, who obviously has served this country admirably. He's a Medal of Freedom recipient because of his work on the AIDS and HIV. We know the extraordinary work that he's done for decades. But as it strictly pertains to the coronavirus pandemic, my attitude is, with you being the face that you have been, you can't show up on Capitol Hill and plead the fifth 111 times. You just can't do that. That's not right. You've got to answer some questions. Now, some people will sit up there and say, what was he supposed to do, Stephen A.? Because, you know, when you look at it, the pardon that he received from President Biden only was from January of 2014 to January 19th of 2025. So anything that he said clearly could potentially incriminate him and could give them fodder to come after him for future potential transgressions, and they can go after him that way. And I certainly don't want an 85-year-old man thrown in jail, particularly with his exemplary service. I took the liberty of, I was lucky enough, fortunate enough for Senator Rand Paul to come on my podcast, my YouTube show this morning. I taped an interview with him, and I specifically asked him the question, and he said, quote, "I do not want to throw Anthony Fauci in jail." I said, that's not what you said, though. You know what I'm saying? You said you wanted to see him prosecuted. You wanted to see. He said, no, I just want the truth. He said, and let him go on his way. I don't want somebody coming out, coming in afterwards and trying to replicate or emulate him. And that's what he said.
Here's my problem. Here's my problem with the whole thing is that, one, and again, you know, look, you know me, you're a dear friend. I like Anthony Fauci. I respect Anthony Fauci. He was good to me when I needed it, and I won't forget it. If Rand Paul wanted the truth, why have they done nothing to pursue what the Chinese did in that lab? Why have they done nothing to change the ability to litigate against the companies that made the vaccine? Why? If you want to know the truth about the jab, as they call it, and about what happened in the lab, why are you only going after Fauci? Does he really believe America created COVID-19?
Well, again, that was a legitimate question on your part, because remember, the president at the time once called it the China virus. Don't ask me, ask China. Remember when President Trump said that? And he said that to the Asian report or whatever. The whole time, right? Well, the whole time. Exactly. So the point is that it's clearly a valid point for you to bring that up, because where's the consistency? There's no consistency there. But in the same breath, when you think about what we went through as a country, the mask, the lockdown, the 6-foot distancing, you know, the shutdown of restaurants and stuff like that, it drastically impeded. I understand worldwide it was a global pandemic, but here in the United States of America, it definitely compromised severely, I might add, the quality of life of the American people. And he was the face of the coronavirus pandemic. And so because that's the reality, it's not like this politician that got some money or did something underhanded and you just want to get him caught or you want to target him. No, in this particular instance, this is a man that we trusted every single word that we said.
The bigger issue here is whether accountability is being applied fairly or only when it serves a political purpose. If lawmakers truly want to understand what went wrong during the COVID-19 pandemic, the investigation has to go far beyond one public health figure. The origins of the virus, international coordination, government preparation, shortages, public communication, and major policy decisions all involve different agencies, officials, administrations, and institutions. Putting the entire controversy on one person can distract from the much larger questions that still deserve clear answers. The situation in early 2020 also needs to be viewed in its proper context, because health officials were dealing with a virus that scientists were still trying to understand. Advice about masks, social distancing, treatments, and vaccines changed as new research became available. Some decisions can certainly be questioned, and officials should be held responsible when evidence shows that mistakes were made. But changing guidance as knowledge develops is not automatically evidence of dishonesty. If the goal is truly to rebuild public confidence, Americans deserve a complete examination of what happened from beginning to end. That means looking at preparedness, medical supplies, communication failures, decisions made by federal officials, actions taken by state governments, and the many choices that shape the response. Millions of people experienced serious disruption during the pandemic, including families, workers, businesses, and students, so the anger and frustration surrounding those years cannot simply be dismissed. At the same time, blaming one individual for every failure ignores how complicated the crisis actually was. Real accountability means following the evidence wherever it goes, even when the answers are uncomfortable or politically inconvenient. If investigators want the public to believe their conclusions, they need to examine the entire system rather than turning one person into the center of a much bigger story.
To the point where if you provided any level of dissent whatsoever, your job was in jeopardy, you could have lost your job, you could have got yourself in trouble, you could have been ostracized because the Democrats were leaning on that to some degree. Let's just keep it a buck and call it what it is. That's what a lot of Democrats were doing at that particular moment in time, and it was problematic. But we trusted this man in a way we would never trust politicians. We trusted this man because of his brilliant record associated with science. And then when you hear about the diaries and you hear about some of the decisions that he was making, had nothing to do with science whatsoever. And then you saw the impact that he was having in California, in the state of New York, in terms of some of the decisions former Mayor de Blasio and obviously some of the elected officials in California had, then that does give you cause to pause, and you do find yourself craving answers. So again, you're not wrong. You make valid points, Chris. I'm not trying to say that. But what I'm saying is, it is legitimate to sit back and look at him, specifically Dr. Fauci, and say, yo, what's up? I would like some answers to these questions. You can get that from him because the trust we placed in him was profound compared to what we'd ever give a politician.
I'm with you. But this was not the first time that he's been before Congress. He's testified on multiple occasions. He's answered these questions multiple times.
But let me bring Chris Cuomo here. Chris Cuomo, contrary to what some critics may try to say about you, you're one of the most honest brokers I've ever encountered. I love you like a brother. You know how I feel about you. And I heard you say something I never heard you say before last night watching you. Because when I see something like this, I got to watch my man Chris Cuomo. And Chris Cuomo said, Dr. Fauci did look like he had something to hide. You never said that before.
You plead
so
the
what
fifth?
I'm saying to you,
because anybody who pleads the fifth,
no, I get you.
Anybody who pleads the fifth,
I'm saying
seems like they're trying to hide something.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair. But what I'm saying, considering your profound respect for this man, your knowledge of his record, his resume, his history, I know how deep it hits you for that to come from you. And what I'm saying is, even though you'd say that about anybody pleading the fifth, go watch yourself talking about somebody pleading the fifth and then re-air how you looked last night when you said it about Fauci. He's different, and it's emblematic of what I said about him just now in terms of how Americans looked at him a few years ago. He was the gospel. He was the face of science. We trusted him. That is not a man we want to see pleading the fifth. Not him. I understand it based on the circumstances and the fact that he had testified over 20 times with Congress, but it's still him, and it's science. And by the way, Chris, if he sat up there and said, and Rand Paul, Senator Paul said this morning to me, if he had sat there and said, look, man, I thought this, I made a mistake. It's not an exact science. I messed up. He said, what could we say? We could criticize him, but that's about it. We can't do anything else. What could we say? But that's not what happened.
I don't believe your analysis is 100% no surprise. I don't believe for a second that they would have accepted an apology. I don't believe for a second that they wouldn't twist anything he said to fit into a felony and that they would immediately refer it. Look, I believe they're going to vote him in contempt, which is a stupid thing to do that advances nothing but their own momentary interests.
This is exactly why accountability needs to be matched with fairness and proper context. People have every right to demand answers after a pandemic that affected millions of lives, but the decisions made during those first uncertain months happened under conditions that were unlike anything most officials had faced before. Scientists were dealing with incomplete information, and as researchers learned more about the virus, public health advice changed along with that evidence. Those changes may have confused or frustrated people, but updating guidance when the facts change is a basic part of scientific work. It is also worth remembering that Dr. Fauci had already appeared before Congress many times over the years and answered questions from lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle about COVID-19, vaccines, and public health policy. That broader record matters because it shows that congressional scrutiny was not something he simply refused to face. One controversial hearing or heated exchange shouldn't erase years of testimony and public questioning. At the same time, there's a major difference between demanding an explanation for a decision and automatically assuming that someone acted with criminal intent. A serious investigation should look at the entire response, including shortages, supply problems, emergency preparation, public messaging, disagreements between agencies, and the decisions made at both the federal and state levels. If the purpose is to learn from the crisis and prevent similar failures in the future, then investigators have to examine the whole system rather than making one person responsible for everything that went wrong. The pandemic revealed problems that existed across many parts of government and healthcare. Hospitals faced major shortages, states followed different approaches, and federal agencies sometimes sent conflicting messages to the public. Those failures deserve serious attention because they can determine how prepared the country will be when another major health emergency arrives. In the end, rebuilding public trust depends on evidence, openness, and consistent standards. Americans deserve clear answers about what happened, but they also deserve investigations that follow the facts instead of forcing every event into a political storyline. That approach is much more likely to restore confidence than treating one public official as the explanation for every failure during a crisis that affected the entire world.
I agree.
So I get why Fauci's lawyers.
Well, I do believe in
made
the
him
comments
do
or something,
that.
though. I do think you. Okay,
What?
but let me
'Cause
say
he's not
this.
Gonna, he's not going to give you. He'll give you the same answers he gave you before, but he's not going to give you new answers.
I don't think it amounts to nothing. I don't think it amounts to nothing. Here's why.
Go ahead.
Because he's Anthony Fauci, and because there's such a direct connection to the Democratic Party. Remember, the Democratic Party rode that wave to get Trump out of office because, again, Trump and the economy, things were, according to them, everything was looking a little bit decent. And then the virus, the pandemic arrived. And all of a sudden, everything went haywire and everything went downhill. And they rode that momentum along with getting Trump to be Trump, with his antagonistic, belligerent, narcissistic, immature self. And what does he do? He goes out there, he runs his mouth, and he puts himself in the untenable positions that he put himself in and got himself booted out of office in 2020. Legitimately, by the way, he lost the damn election. It wasn't rigged. He lost. But the point is that the Democrats rode that wave. And so when you look at Anthony Fauci now, the bottom line is they don't get to separate themselves from him now. They don't get to pull that off. If there's any suspicion that can be elevated in his direction, that gets attached to the Democratic Party because you utilized him basically to enforce so much upon the American people at that particular moment in time. And folks are not going to forget that come midterm.
You're right.
They're not going to forget it.
You're right. You're right. And I'll tell you what, one of my many, many regrets, and I know regrets don't really serve us well, is I told Anthony at the time, I do not like the position they're putting you in. I do not like it. This is political messaging. Tony, you are no politician. But they liked him there. Trump wanted him there because he didn't want to own it. Biden wanted him there because he didn't want to own it. And now Fauci has to own it, and I've never thought it was fair, and I was always worried we were coming here.
Public trust can take years to build and only a short time to disappear, but a controversy by itself does not automatically prove that someone acted improperly. During the pandemic, health officials were making difficult choices while dealing with information that was incomplete and changing almost every day. Advice about masks, social distancing, vaccines, and other precautions shifted as researchers collected more evidence and gained a clearer understanding of the virus. Looking back, some of those changes may seem confusing or frustrating, but that is not the same thing as proving that officials deliberately misled the public. Science depends on testing ideas, reviewing new evidence, and changing conclusions when stronger information becomes available. It is also important to recognize that government pandemic policies have been examined through different investigations, congressional hearings, and oversight efforts over the years. Critics have raised serious concerns about communication, transparency, and decision-making, but no single official had complete control over every policy adopted across the country. Governors, mayors, school systems, businesses, federal agencies, and local health departments all made decisions that shaped how communities responded. Accountability should also be based on the same